So good afternoon, Elliott. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, very well. How you doing?
Yeah, very well. Very well indeed. Thank you very much for taking the time to come today.
Good to be here.
Hello, viewers. As you do, we are back in our series at Intermark Global doing another podcast. Elliott has been very kind enough to join us today. I think with that, it would be great if you introduce yourself.
Yep.
Elliott works for a company called API. Take it away.
Yeah, cool. So thanks for having me, Stephen. Really appreciate being here. As Stephen said, I work for a company called API Global. I'm the regional account manager here for the Middle East. And I've been investing in property for 10 years myself, moved over to Dubai around 4 years ago now. Nobody's just having a conversation about it. Absolutely love it here. Full of opportunity, good quality of living. But I've always invested back in the UK for a number of different reasons that I'm sure we'll probably talk about.
Yeah, perfect. You touched on a lot of points there. Could you just tell us a bit more about API? I know it was your 10-year anniversary that you celebrated this year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So API Global are a company and organisation that focus purely on UK investment property. Everything we do is through our partners, such as yourselves. We work with wealth managers, a number of companies that have a client base that are looking for safety, security, a good investment, and we then support them through that process. I think what's important is the fact that we deal with so many clients who are based overseas. We don't just focus on finding the right property.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a really important part. It's not the whole thing. So we deal with it from the very beginning, the due diligence on the project, the developer, the investment case. We'll study the area. So we'll only work in certain parts of the UK that we've got complete belief in, that we've done our tried and tested studies on. And then just the smaller things as well. So, an example, people investing over here or buying property over here, that doesn't go through the normal legal process as we know it does back in the UK, right? Yeah. So if someone's based over here and maybe they don't have that experience of UK investing, who do they go to for the legal process? So we'll support with that as well.
So it's like a 360 service.
100%. Yeah, all the way then to the mortgage process. Again, people don't realise maybe they can buy a property with a mortgage if they're not from the UK.
1,000,000%. It's a question we're often asked.
Yeah. People, I think we take it for granted that people just assume and understand they can do that.
Yeah.
That's not the case. And then finally, when the project's completed and handed over, who's going to be the person that finds the tenant? Because that's what's going to generate the income, right? Who's going to find the tenant? Who's going to do the referencing, the credit checks on them, collect the rent every single month for the client? We actually own the lettings business as well that support that as well. So
what's the name of your lettings business?
So it's Redstone Lettings and Management.
Fantastic. Yeah. And is that kind of UK-wide or is it in
UK-wide, yeah. So they work with a huge lettings business who've got a massive database of tenants. So that's how we get the reach.
Nice.
But with a huge organisation like that, they don't have the ability to look after the client, pick up the phone, have a conversation with them. So then from the ongoing management perspective, that's all done internally. And we've got a team, obviously, in the UK, different parts of the UK, and over here in Dubai as well, for when people want to meet, have a conversation.
Just get an understanding,
Just sit in front of people. I think property is a very personal business.
Yeah.
And building relationships, knowing who you're dealing with, who you're speaking to, it's just massively important.
1,000,000%. And in terms of that management company, is that both AST or should I say long term for people that don't know the phrase, and short term let?
So it's ASTs at the moment. Okay. But we do have a partner that we work with that can handle the short term let. So again, it's if we're not the people that are dealing with it, we're making sure that we've vetted the people that are coming in. And
we're going to give you a free ball to someone.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, lovely. And in terms of API, I know you've been massively successful over the last 10 years. Can you tell me a couple of successes? Past and present. And we were at your lovely event. What was it, last Thursday?
Last Thursday,
last Thursday.
Good fun.
Absolutely great fun, guys. Launch of a product called Vivere. If you don't know it, Manchester, Castlefield, perfect location, completes in 2026. Tell me a bit about your events, because I know you did one at the W, and a bit about API and your successes over the last 10 years.
Yes, I mean, look, from a success, I think the success that you've really seen in the business is shown by the quality of developers that we work with now. Having been in the industry for a long time, having built that reputation, we're no longer dealing with, the small developers that are building their first project. And it's nothing against those guys, good luck to them. But we want to be working with people who are tried and tested, building really high quality projects for our clients. Now, at the beginning of, your business journey, if you like, you can't do that. So the fact that we've kind of built on that success, we're dealing with, developers that are publicly listed, developers that have delivered 3,500 homes across the country. Wow. So I think that's really an element of success. From the client's perspective, one developer in particular, what we've seen is from the point of launch, so when the property is originally sold off plan to when it's completed and handed over, you're looking at between 15 and 20% growth on that development.
Wow.
Now, that's a good number, right? Where it gets really exciting is you're only putting in a quarter of that property value. So if you're only putting in 25%, and that property grows 20% in value, you're close to doubling your money before the project's even built. So kind of two elements there, the success of us and then obviously the success of our clients. And the more success our clients have, the more success we have as a business.
In turn, of course. So being an expat myself, I know kind of living in Dubai and the benefits. Could you just tell us a bit about what you like about Dubai, being here for 4 years and why maybe you would recommend people to come out here?
Yeah, so I moved over 4 years ago now. It was the Christmas pandemic. So I don't even remember it. There was an announcement. I mean, I don't really watch the news, to be honest. That was the only time I was watching the news was when he was finding out what was happening with lockdown. So Boris come on the screen and he said, basically, Christmas is cancelled. Like three
while he was having a party, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's not go down that road. 3 or 4 days before Christmas is cancelled. Can't go see your family, and from tomorrow, international travel is banned.
Yeah.
So me, my wife, and my son, who was 18 months at the time, packed a suitcase.
Wow.
Drove to the airport.
No way.
And jumped on a flight to Dubai and was like, we'll work it out when we get there.
Wow.
Now, when I was here, originally before working for API, all I was doing was investing in UK property. So as you know, sometimes when you're living over here, in order to have a visa or be able to live here, you have to be linked to a business.
Yeah.
Where property, and this is where I'm really grateful for what it's given me, during the pandemic, Dubai had something called a remote working visa. So you could have a business in another country and they would give you the ability to live here. Okay. And my property portfolio back home gave me the ability to live in Dubai.
Very nice.
So sometimes I get maybe a bit over passionate about property, but I've been doing it a long time and I can see what it's given me. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. And yeah, now living here, quality of life's great. My son, the school that he goes to, all of the activities after, just be able to take him to the beach of the weekend, in the sun, swimming in the sea. I'm a huge believer in living here. Yeah.
No, fantastic. That's actually really interesting. I want to touch on that in terms of your property portfolio. When did you start property? What got you into it? I know you're a big advocate of it. What are the major benefits that you've seen apart from being able to move to another country and have a wage?
So I started at the age of 23. The reason for getting into it was, I guess, a bit of escapism, if you like. So I'd played professional football from the age of 9 up until 18. Didn't work out, as it doesn't for many people at that age. I was at Charlton and Leyton Orient.
Oh, lovely. South East boy.
4 knee operations, didn't work out. Come out of that. And, I think... maybe a little side story here. I think a lot of those younger footballers need to be more looked after from a financial education perspective. Something that I would love to do is to be able to provide that kind of support for those kind of people.
I was a scholar at QPR at 16 as well, so I know what it's like. And one of my best mates, I'm not going to name drop him, but he used to play for Fulham, was a captain in the Fulham youth team.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. England under 21 player, did really, really well. Did his knee as well, as everybody does in football. Did their knee. But ended up, I think it was at like Stockport.
Yeah.
And then just has never played football since. He's a teacher now. Loves his role.
Yeah.
But that was his dream. Yeah. Like he was going to be a footballer and he just didn't have plans after that.
No. I think if you make it even at those lower levels, it's a good quality of life and it's a great experience. But what do you do at 35 when you retire?
And
unfortunately, they don't have the people around them. They have people around them trying to take advantage as opposed to this is how I can help. And, focus on your kind of financial stability. So anyway, so that ended at 18. I went into work. I was working for a telecoms company, which I'll be honest, I absolutely hated. And I've gone from living my dream job to now in an office in a role that I just really didn't like.
Very big difference, right?
So I needed something. I didn't know what it was going to be. I ended up going to like a property seminar and just realized like, I need to do this. This is the only way I'm going to get out of the hole I'm in, if you like. So yeah, I bought my first property at the age of 23, which has a lot of challenges. Bearing in mind, I didn't own the property I'd lived in. So I was renting, but the first property I bought was an investment property.
Very smart idea, actually, looking back on it.
For me, I've actually never owned a property I live in.
Yeah.
For me, I put my money into assets that generate an income, and that income can service my debt, which is the rent, if you like. So, which I know is a little bit out there, but that's kind of the way I like to do it.
Good concept.
So yeah, and just kind of built it up from there. Found myself in a position at 27, 28, where I could then leave the telecoms, the day job, and that's what kind of gave me the flexibility to just jump on a flight and move over here.
And was the most of the portfolio in London, or did you invest outside?
I started in Liverpool.
Okay, very nice. Why Liverpool?
So at the time, my focus, and this is where for me, property always comes down to strategy. My focus was generate as much income as possible for as little capital as possible, because I didn't really have any capital.
So did you invest with a mortgage?
Yeah, so mortgage, leverage. I'm always leveraging as much as possible. For me, that's what makes property stand out for other investments. The fact that you can put in a percentage of the asset, but still get 100% of the growth.
Perfect, isn't it?
I mean, where else can you do that?
Yeah.
So started off in the north of the country, invested in properties that were generating income, and then kind of tried to treat it like a bit of a game of Monopoly. Once you do some of the smaller ones, then you start buying the bigger properties that generate the bigger income. And now for me, I'm more in a position where I'm focused on the long-term growth of the asset. I think really where a lot of the clients that we work with, they're in that position. People are well established over here. They don't necessarily need to buy a small cheap house that's going to give them a couple of £100 a month. They want something that's going to preserve their wealth, give them that long-term growth, and work hard for them, because they've probably worked hard for that money. Now they want the money to work hard for them. Yeah.
Touching on that, so I think that's a great point. Could you just elaborate a bit more on the refinancing process and how you could leverage your capital to basically snowball your portfolio organically?
Okay, cool. So let's use round figures on this. So let's say you've bought a property. That property over a number of years has increased £100,000. Okay, that £100,000, people are concerned about. Question I'm sure you get asked this as well is,
a lot.
What about the tax?
Yeah.
What about the tax? What about the capital gains tax? The budget's coming. What's going to happen when I sell that property? Why sell it? Right? Because you could sell that property and regardless of the structure, whether it's limited company, personal name, there will be some tax to pay. Okay, which actually I'm okay with paying some tax as long as it's not too much. However, what we could look at is that £100,000 you could remortgage. So effectively, you go to your existing lender or a new lender. They give you the valuation of the existing value plus the additional 100, and they'll normally give you around 75% of that.
Very nice.
So £75,000 is then removed from the equity of the property, now sits in your bank account.
Lovely.
Right? Now, the discipline bit is then not to just go and spend that, although you can if you want.
Of course.
But you've now pulled out £75,000 completely tax-free, and you've got that £75,000 to go and buy another property. Now, so you've got 2 properties that increase in value. You do the same again. Then you've got 4 properties. Like, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. But if you get into this and you benefit from that growth and you're willing to be disciplined,
it's a slow build, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to touch on that then, in terms of structuring your portfolio, do you think there is a way that you'd best advise? A lot of clients ask me, Stephen, do I buy in my personal name? Do I buy in a limited company? What do you feel is better and
so
why?
The politician's answer is it really depends on everyone's personal situation. There's a couple of reasons I'll share with you why people might look at personal name or why they might look at limited company. So the benefits of personal name is your mortgage rate will be slightly cheaper. And what you'll find is if let's imagine there's a expat over here, living in Dubai, not utilising their £12,500 salary allowance or income allowance in the UK. If that's not being utilised, then owning in personal name could be beneficial because you can utilise that.
Because you've got a buffer of 12 grand.
If you've got a property that's renting out for £1,200 a month, as an example, you're using your 12.5 grand, you're not going to pay any tax on that.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, as you start to build, and if you've maybe got an income in the UK or you've now got multiple properties, clients may then look to buy in limited company. Two real benefits of limited company. One is corporation tax is less than income tax once you get to a certain level. Okay. And the other one is that second one. The other one is that your mortgage payments is fully deductible. Or if it's an interest-only mortgage. So if you've got £1,000 a month rent, £600 mortgage, that mortgage is fully tax deductible. Okay, so everyone, and I had this, right? I mean, was you ever on salary in the UK?
Yeah.
So you have your payslip, right? You've got your top figure. This is what you could have had. Then you get your tax national insurance, and then the bottom is actually what they pay you. Property is a business, so you get it completely tax-free. Then you spend. Okay, and a lot of these things that you spend money on are tax deductible, and then what's left, that's what you get taxed on. So the tax liability is normally far lower than people anticipate, regardless of whether that's personal or limited company. But it's important that, again, from a support perspective, we're working out what the right option is before they go and buy the property. It's much easier to get that right at the beginning than to try and change that further down the line.
And I think that's a great point. That's where we come in, because I have this question, what do I do? And when I say to people, it's really specific on your personal situation. The phrase that I like to use, I like to tailor each of our consultancies to whatever the client is trying to achieve. I think the most important question when talking to a client is, what's the long-term goal? And maybe you don't have a long-term goal. Maybe it's a short-term goal. Maybe that you just want rental income. If you want rental income, great. However, I don't know if it's the same for you, but what we find is most people are going to say something along the lines, I want generational wealth. I want pension back home. In terms of people in Dubai, why do you think you would recommend people investing back in the UK? And maybe not just Dubai, expats in general, and even non-UK residents.
Well, I think that's where Dubai is so interesting, right? Is that whilst it's such a small place, if you like, it has so many different nationalities. And what we find is different people are investing in the UK for different reasons. So there'll be certain nationalities that actually are less focused about the return it gives them, but they want their money in something that is much safer than their own country, in the banks who they don't trust, don't have a relationship with. They know the UK property market has stood the test of time, and it's an exchange play. They want their money sat in UK pounds in a UK asset. So that's one reason. For maybe different nationalities or expats, as an example, you raised a great question: is why are you doing this? And it's what's your end strategy? Sometimes that's hard for people to think about because they haven't even bought the house yet.
Of course.
Thinking, what's the end? But it's really important, And again, we get similar answers. Generational wealth. They want to create a retirement plan. They don't have a pension over here. It's a great life over here. But what happens when that high-paying job ends? Because it will end at some point.
Of course.
So we have to make sure that we've got a plan for when that happens. So for those kind of people, they're looking for something that's going to give them a stable, secure return, something that they can invest in and almost forget about because the systems and the processes are in place. They just watch it, build in value, create more income, but they can focus on their life over here. So I think kind of the main reasons that we see people invest in UK: safety, stability, security, proven track record. I think people underestimate how good the returns actually are as well. So they're the main reasons.
And that they're multifaceted.
100%.
Because I think people just think, I get the biggest misconception, what is the rental income? And I go, okay, rental income's great, but we buy property for capital growth. It's the equity that you really make your money. And we touched on this earlier about the refinancing process. You get to take money out tax-free. Get to take, especially if it's in a limited company, you have the deductible amount. Like your rental income's always going to be taxed. However, that capital growth is not. And that also leads me now onto a question of, in terms of the UK, there's lots of different places, and
Yeah.
Especially in this region, whenever you say invest in the UK, what does everybody say to you?
London.
Of course,
You didn't even set me up for that one.
Yeah,
London,
like
yeah.
It's just London. But where in the country would you advise people to invest, and why? I know you got your first property in Liverpool. Is that still a great place to invest?
It can be. I think there's two areas. You're looking at the city and go, does the city work high level? And then you have to go, does the development work beyond that as well? Because there'll be some great opportunities in Manchester, as an example, and there'll be some investments in Manchester that, in my opinion, don't really stack up.
So it's like a data-centric look.
Exactly. So I think, look, what you're looking for is somewhere that has great universities, that has great transport links, that is established, but still has the ability for regeneration and growth, and also not just growth in terms of the existing city. I mean, Manchester is a great example of this. If you look at the inner city ring road of Manchester now, it's pretty much built. I know we have a couple of projects that are sort of the last pieces in the puzzle. Well, what happens when that's fully built? They have to go wider.
Of course.
So that part of Manchester becomes even more prime central. And all of those developments that sit just around it now become part of the main city centre. So you're looking for areas that have got that ability to grow, people want to live. I think for me, Manchester's an absolute hotspot. Birmingham's a great opportunity. There will always be London.
Of course,
London will never disappear. And I think actually it's been quite a static market over the last 2 years. And, people are ruling it out and saying it's dead. But for me now, here's where the opportunity is. I know you know that we work with a developer who recently discounted a number of units in order to get them sold and, can continue and focus on their next project. When in the history of London has that been able to happen?
It's true. It's very true.
So whilst people see it as flat, it's great because there's opportunities. So for me, look, people ask when's the right time to invest. It's always the right time. You just have to change the strategy. So London still works if you're getting things at the right price. Yeah,
you got me to get out one of my favorite phrases. The best time to invest was yesterday. The second best time is today. Because it's always going to grow and your prices are always going to go higher.
100%. I mean, look, so from my investment journey, I was told not to invest at 23 because it's too young and to wait. Then you had the changes in stamp duty. Then you had Brexit, where they said there was going to be all of these empty houses and no one's going to be wanting to rent property anymore. Everyone's going to leave. Then you had the pandemic. So all of these reasons where people say, Elliott, don't invest, don't invest, don't invest. You just have to turn down the noise and go, I'm going to buy it, I'm going to hold it, I'm going to generate an income. And it is going to grow in value, and it has done. Not for me, for everyone.
1,000,000%. To go and to touch on that, I'm very data-centric when I look at property. And we say you take the macroeconomic approach, that's looking countrywide. That's then saying pinpointing the Northwest is a great place to invest. It's going to grow, Sav say, 28.5% over the next 5 years. Then you take the microeconomic approach as, do you know what? Manchester looks like a great place to invest. But then where in Manchester? Okay, Deansgate is quite built out. We looked at what's happened with the Great Jackson Street and everything that's been done there. Mini Manhattan. But what areas of that city is now going to grow? And also in terms of property, what you've just said is, it's very true. If we look over the last 70 years, the UK property market has grown by 364%, inclusive of inflation. And over that time, you've had the credit crunch, you've had Brexit, you've had COVID. And I love economists because it's always doom and gloom. It's 100%. One thing about the UK that I don't miss since moving over here is how negative the media is.
It's crazy.
Oh, property market's going to crash. The property market's going to crash. I remember, 2 years ago? We touched on it. It's been quite difficult for us in the past 24 months. We had Theresa May, Kwasi Kwarteng. I don't want to talk about the budget, but it wasn't a great time after that. And inflation rose to 8.7%. We've just seen inflation drop to 1.7%, the lowest it's been in 3 years. But at that time, to go back to what I speak about, we had so much doom and gloom. But what you talked about earlier is when you buy property, what do? You hold. And if you hold and you ride it out, it's going to come back and it's going to grow.
I think what's fascinating about property is you look at when all these doom and gloom things happen. stock market drops, all of these different things drop. But why is that? Is that if people need to liquidate something very quickly, stocks can be liquidated.
Yeah.
Boom, you can go on your phone, go into an app, sell that. People start selling, that drops.
Yeah.
UK property is quite static, and sometimes the process to buy a property can be a bit painful. Let's not polish that up. But the benefit of that is when there's uncertainty in the market or there's challenges, there's not a huge influx of people just offloading property.
Yes. Yeah.
So it stays very, very solid during difficult times. And then when things are good and times are good, prices go to, continue to increase as well. Okay. So for me, I think that it really has stood the test of time.
I'm going to play devil advocate here. I'm going to give you an objection that I often get.
Sure.
And it's, I see loads of cranes in Manchester.
Yeah.
Is the city getting saturated?
Yeah.
What would you say to a client that says that?
Travel to Manchester and see how many people are queuing up outside doors to view a property. I think where the UK is very unique from an investment perspective, and you compare it to the UAE here, absolutely amazing place. But what happens when the buildings or the areas get saturated? They just build further out into the desert, right? They even build out into the sea.
Yes.
The UK surrounded by water. They are not going to build a palm in the UK. Let's be realistic about that.
A bit too cold for that.
Yeah, exactly. So the reality is there is no more space. There is no more land. So that's where you see that continued forced appreciation. There's a lot of bold statements that have come from not just this government, but the government before and the government before that about the amount of homes they need to build. If you look at any of the data on the amount of homes that they've said they're going to build versus what they actually build, it's normally around 50%.
300,000 homes per year for the last 10 years. Yeah. They've hit the quote of 150,000 twice last decade.
There you go.
Numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah. So it's great to see that there is some more construction going, more buildings going, but the reality is it's still not keeping up with the demand, which from a country's perspective is not a good thing. If you look at it from an investor perspective, and if you're just looking at it, data, numbers, facts, figures, over demand, chronic lack of supply will continue to force growth, not just in the property values, but in the rents as well.
1,000,000%. It's funny that you touched on rents there. There was a recent BBC article and it said for every one property in the UK, there are 20 renters looking to rent that one property. 2 places it was higher. Yeah. The Midlands, 25 renters. Northwest, 30 renters. Yeah. So when people say, oh, this is saturated, I'm like, go and try and rent an apartment in Manchester. Yeah. And you then now tell me it's saturated. There's so much demand, and that's what it's growing. In the UK, like we said, it's a finite place. Yeah. There's so much going on there, so many people that want to go and live there. And there's so much external investment. And that kind of leads me on to my next question. In terms of regeneration in the UK, we said this is a really important point when we're looking at investing. Are there any regeneration projects that you know of that you would say, this is something to look at, and maybe this is an area that could be highlighted for investment? So
we spoke a bit about Manchester, so let's look at another city now. An example would be in Birmingham. So part of Birmingham called Digbeth, where if you look at it geographically, it is very centrally located.
East side of city centre,
exactly,
isn't it?
Very centrally located. However, still a lot of work to be done. Yeah. But if you look at the investment that they're putting in, you can actually search it, Digbeth Regeneration Scheme. It's incredible the amount of capital that's going in there. Now, what's going to happen to those property prices? And we've had projects in that area. You look at those prices versus the city centre, they're chalk and cheese. What you'll find is the gap will start to get bridged as that area begins to regenerate.
100%.
So anything that's being kind of backed to that level is huge.
There's a massive regeneration project called Smithfields, and that's going to be 1.9 billion over the next 15 years. It's quite similar to what happened in Media City in Manchester, going on in Digbeth area. But also, I think the biggest thing, HS2. Yeah, it's going to take us a while to complete it. But if it's anything like what we saw, the Elizabeth line in London, I think that's going to be crazy. I think it's down to 49 minutes you can get from Birmingham to London. Yeah, and being a Londoner or kind of even living on the outskirts of London, our daily commute sometimes within getting in and out of London, what are we talking about, an hour?
Yeah,
an hour
that's
and change?
the norm. If you're sub an hour, you're very happy. And to be able to do that from the middle of the country is mind-blowing. Now, I know you said it's maybe still a few years away, but this is where, again, we start to cherry-pick developers and projects. We have a project very close to the HS2 station that is going to complete and hand over at a very similar time to HS2. Now, that area also is surrounded by Deutsche Bank, the BBC offices, Goldman Sachs. So you think about the tenant profile there, people that and companies that have got offices in London and offices in Birmingham. And now you've got that connectivity between the two in under an hour. This is where you start to get smart and go, okay, this is where this development makes sense for those reasons. HS2 is huge.
Huge. And kind of maybe thinking as a landlord now, you said something there in terms of the tenant. How would you invest looking for tenants? And being a landlord yourself, what would you look for in a tenant? Who do you want to rent your apartment and why?
So when we're working with developers and we're determining whether or not it's the right project for us to market and bring to our clients, that's a really important part. Who's the tenant profile? What rents are going to be achieved? Because demand is one thing. You want there to be rental demand, but you want that demand to be from the right people. So anyone working in those corporate companies that have got a stable and secure job, that have got a good level of income, that's certainly one area. One of the other areas that we really focus on is cities that have high graduate retention. So let's imagine, you've got a load of students that have gone to Manchester, Birmingham University, Nottingham, another good example. They've studied there. They now stay in that city.
Yes.
They're now working in a high-paid graduate salary job. I'll give you an example, actually. Derby has got the highest graduate salary outside of London.
No way.
So people sometimes turn their nose up at Derby. Well, actually, there's a huge Rolls-Royce factory and office there, and it has the highest graduate salary outside of London.
In turn, that means their disposable income, because it's a cheaper city to live in.
Absolutely.
They're actually probably richer than people that are living in London.
There you go. Now, what people or what that city has missed is high quality accommodation. Now, all of a sudden, you have graduates that are earning good money that are maybe working for Rolls-Royce or one of the big companies there. What do they want? They want good quality accommodation. And 100%. That's where we're now bringing developments to market that are those high spec, high amenity, high standard into a city that's probably not on people's radar like Derby.
Very
and
true.
Still at a very low price point compared to the likes of Birmingham and Manchester as well.
1,000,000%. And there's 2 points there you've kind of just brought to the forefront of my mind, but it's the cultural shift in, first of all, kind of working. So what we're seeing a lot more, especially post-pandemic, are people working from home. So now you could be working from home in a city like Derby, but working for a big company that is based in London. Might have to go down there once a fortnight. But because you're living in a city which is more economical in terms of cost of living, you've got a bigger disposable income. What are they doing with that disposable income? Secondly, the cultural shift is kind of the cities that we mentioned. 20 years ago, something called the brain drain. And it was basically people going to study in these northern cities, these Russell groups, your Birmingham, your Manchester, wherever it be. But there were no job opportunities there. So they had to come back to London for your big jobs, for your Canary Wharf or Liverpool Street, wherever it was. But now we've seen Manchester, 80% of the FTSE 100 companies have a footprint in Manchester. BBC moved their head office there, touched on Birmingham, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Goldman Sachs, Derby, the likes of Rolls-Royce, Liverpool. I think it is the most startups in the country. Birmingham as well. The average age is actually the youngest average age of any city in Europe. With that, that's amazing in terms of the tenant pool that you're going for. And I always say, happy tenant, happy landlord. Because you also, and to touch on, we work in property. People are always going to say, guys, you're always going to talk up property. There are bad sides of properties. And having a bad tenant can be a nightmare. And to have that and look kind of for the forefront of the tenant quality can really change your investment.
100%. I mean, the tenant is the most important part in your business. And look, I think sometimes where we talk about the numbers and facts and figures, you forget that you're providing good quality accommodation to good people in the UK. That's a bit of a byproduct here that people maybe underestimate. Go, actually, I house a great family who are living there, and it's their first apartment as a couple or as a family, and you know, all these little things that are outside of the cold hard investment side is awesome. But you're absolutely right. In order to get the right tenants, you have to have good quality accommodation. It's a two-way street. So if you provide the right projects and product, you're going to bring the right people in.
And let's now look at property as an investment.
Yeah.
I spoke about it earlier, but in terms of property, there's a couple of ways that you can invest. You can invest long-term, or you can invest short-term, but also have a long-term scope in there because you're always going to get capital growth. So investing for serviced accommodation, could you just touch on what serviced accommodation is and people don't know? Or investing against what's called AST or long-term. What have you found, and what's the difference between both?
Okay, cool. So we start with serviced accommodation, effectively renting out short-term lets. So people say, is that like Airbnb or is that like Booking.com? Well, they are platforms as to which you may advertise your properties. But ultimately, you are renting out the room on as little as a nightly basis, maybe up to a monthly basis. Okay. Now, the benefit of that is a guest now, they're not a tenant anymore, they're now a guest of that property, is going to pay a much higher rate to rent a property out for a night or a couple of nights versus for 12 months. So when people are very yield focused, short-term lets is normally a good move for them because they are going to generate higher yields. The downside or the counter to that is you will not have as much consistency as you would with someone who is paying a fixed amount every single month for at least a year. And the reality is those tenants tend to live 3, 4, 5 years.
100%.
So it's weighing it up. The standard AST, so assured short hold tenancy, which I know we are starting to see some reforms and some changes, but ultimately it's renting a property out long term and someone paying a fixed monthly amount. Very much focused to people who are who want ease, stability, consistency. For me, if you have no properties in your portfolio, I think that's the way to go because you want to generate something. You build it like a pyramid, right? You want your base of at the bottom that's kind of your slow, steady, consistent. Stable. It still gives you great returns, by the way. And then as you start to go higher, then you start to look at the things that are maybe a bit more lucrative, higher yields. But you don't want a portfolio of short-term lets that are up and down and all over like this. So I think there's, and we're about portfolio building, right? It's not about buying one house. It's how do we help a client build a portfolio? And usually both of those strategies will come in at some point.
Perfect. To lead on to what I'm thinking then, let's have a bit of an example. I'm a client. I'm a UK expat. I've been living in the UAE for 2 years. I've been able to save quite a bit of money. I've got 100 grand spare. I'm saying, I want to invest back in the UK. What advice would you give me?
So it's all about asking the right questions. I know we spoke about this before. You know, why are you doing this? Because property's been there forever. So why did you wake up today and say today's the day? Now, it could be that they've actually been thinking about property for a long time and now they've got the capital to do it. Great. It could be that they've had a significant life change. Maybe they've just had a kid and they're now starting to think longer term instead of just the shorter term. Maybe they've had a promotion or their job's potentially at risk. All of these reasons. So it's important for us to understand. It can get quite personal. And I think the more open people are with us, the better we can advise, right? So then it's, well, what are you looking to achieve? Okay, what returns are enough to get you excited, but also what's your adversity to risk? So if someone goes, actually, I'm really comfortable, I just want to get maximum returns, then we'd look at something like short-term lets as an example. If someone goes, look, I just want something that I want to put my money, I've worked hard for this, I want to put it into something that's going to give me a great return and not give me a headache, then we'd look at the standard ASTs. Okay. So that first of all is about the strategy. I always say strategy first, it's an SAP acronym, okay? Strategy, then the area, then the property. I think a lot of people make the mistake of that's the property and then try and work out the strategy.
We get a lot about, that's the area. I just want to buy here. Why do you want to buy here?
Exactly, because actually a short-term let property in a certain part of Manchester might not work very well. Whereas if you've got a development that's really close to the AO Arena, where they have boxing events and concerts, well, that's a great area. If you've got something that's closer to, more of the corporate city part, is that going to work? Actually, you want people that are going to be renting for long term. So strategy first, then we start focusing on the area. Now, it's very hard not to invest with emotions in property because it's a house, it's a thing. And people go, I want to invest here because it's where I grew up or I've got great memories. We kind of have to put that all to one side. So the area is determined on what do we think is going to give the best return, has the best potential for growth, and is going to give you consistent income from day one. So then we'll start to look at a couple of different areas. It might get to the point where the client goes, do you know what? I just feel a bit more comfortable with that project in Manchester than that one in Birmingham. And that's fine. Then we start to look at the specific properties and projects. We start to look at, is it a 1-bedroom? Is it a 2-bedroom? Generally speaking, the 1 and 2 bed apartments are, as you know, the areas that have the most demand. So that is where we'll see most of our clients investing in. And we're picking the right unit for them. A lot of the time we have exclusivity across the whole building.
Fantastic.
So we're not going, we need to give you that unit actually because that's all we can offer. We go, well, okay, based on your requirements, your preferences, your budget, we can cherry pick 2 or 3 of the most suited units for you in that project.
Fantastic.
And then that's when we can get it done.
Lovely. And in terms of, we spoke a lot about in terms of investing in apartments. People often come to me, Stephen, I want to invest in a house. Why should people invest in apartments over houses, or why would people invest in houses over apartments? Do you feel there's a difference? Do you personally invest in one over the other?
So look, I would say it just comes down to the demand. Where is the demand? You have to take the emotion away from it, whether it's a house, an apartment, a bungalow, a windmill. If there was a huge demand of windmills, I'd say invest in that. Right?
Yeah, it's true.
So when you look at the data, the highest demand for properties in the UK, in the cities, are 1 and 2 bed apartments. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's not try and find the next big thing. Let's do something that we know is going to work. Can houses work? They can, but they are in different parts of the country. If you're investing in a house in a city centre, your price point is going to be much higher. And what you'll find is with those higher house prices, you assume that the rent will increase at the same amount. Right? That isn't the case. So you'll see a huge increase in property price and a little bit of an increase in rental figure. So again, if we just look at the data and the numbers, it doesn't quite work. So yeah, for me, stability, security, demand, your 1 and 2 bed apartments are where it's at.
I would definitely agree. I think also just in terms of the tenant profile, when we look at houses, I think of I call it the secondary purchase. So if you look at the UK, you're at home, you come out of uni, you get your first apartment, you might rent that with a mate, you both of you got a room, great. That's our perfect tenant profile. So looking for that first gen. But maybe once you get to kind of early 30s, then you go, maybe living in the city is not for me. I want a bit somewhere a bit quieter. And then you go and get a house, and that's a bit different. But I think the target market of especially investment, you touched on it, I'm just echoing it here, is looking for that young working professional that is in the city, that wants convenience. I remember when I was living, so I'm born and raised in Battersea, but I moved and I was working in Mayfair. And I was like, where am I going to, I just left my parents' house. I'm like, where can I live that's going to get me closest to? And I moved to Brixton, which is also, it's just around the corner. But the reason why I moved there, it was on the Victoria line. So a couple of stops and I was in and out because I found like my house was pretty much a bag drop. But it was the location of my apartment 100%. That I was really caring about. That was the most important thing. And as an investor, I think these are the things that we need to, or we educate and we help with in terms of telling the clients, of kind of getting in the mind of your tenant, right? Yeah,
and there are far more people like yourself that have that requirement than the people that have now decided maybe the city's not for them. So do you go for a small number of people over here, or a large number? Well, again, we look at supply and demand. That's what it really boils down to.
Yeah.
Not enough supply and a huge demand, a huge number of people with that exact same mentality creates no void periods, consistent rent, and consistent growth in the rent as well.
Perfect. Maybe let's touch on this region then. Working in the GCC and working with clients in GCC as a non-UK resident. Why would you recommend a non-UK resident to invest in the UK? I know we touched on a lot of points, but if you could just be a bit more specific to them, and maybe one success story that you could tell me of a non-res, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think, well, I'll share that story actually as I kind of give the reasons. Working with a client over here, one of the big families in Ras Al Khaimah.
Lovely.
I think the first challenge was just the element of the unknown. So, obviously very comfortable with here. He's born and raised here. His family have been here for hundreds of years, knows Ras Al Khaimah really well, Dubai very well, obviously down the road. Investing in a country that he's only been to 3 times ever, brings some challenges, right? Because it's that element of the unknown. So he asked me the question, why should I do this? Because he's had a lot of success over here. And people will have success over here. It's not to talk down the market here. But I said, well, your eggs are all in one basket at the moment. You're investing in a market that has the ability to grow very quickly. But as we have seen, decrease very quickly as well. And he then shared a story of when he was investing pre-pandemic and a lot of his properties reduced by 50% after pandemic. What happened in the UK? Not a lot really. Stayed pretty stagnant. So he's experienced the good and bad of this as a market. The UK brings something very different. It's not a case of sell all your properties here and buy here. It's, well, have an element of both. Right? So I think for me, it's always important when we talk about the benefits of the UK, we're not talking about how bad everything else is, about how good the UK market can be. I think as long as people can get comfortable with the investing somewhere away from where they live, which, we do now, right? Being based over here, yes, we understand the UK, but I can't drive down the road and have a look at one of my properties and see if it's still there. It's that ability to let go. So I think, if you're looking for something that is going to make your money work hard for you, I know we keep saying that, but people work hard over here. Yes, they earn very well. Yes, they earn tax-free, but they put the graft in. So when that money's then sat in the bank and doing nothing for them, and if we start going down the rabbit hole of inflation, actually that money sat in the bank is eroding as opposed to doing nothing. Put it into something that is going to give you a good return and has proven track record to give you a good return and have the ability to let go. Now, going full circle, I guess back to the beginning of this conversation, we have all the bits in place so that clients can let go. You don't have to travel to the UK to buy the property. Over here, you have to go to, a government office and sign the documents. You don't have to do that. It's all done from here. Solicitors can send you contracts electronically. So you can do everything from the comfort of Dubai, benefit from, as much as there is negativity about the UK, it is an incredible market.
It is.
It's a great country and it's had a lot of stability and security. I prefer to live here, but there are plenty of people that will never leave the UK and will live there forever. So that's why I would say.
Fantastic. And kind of working with API then, we spoke about this 360 process. As a client, again, let's give an example. I'm a client that comes in. We offer a similar service. But just to explain the client journey. So from coming in, how would you help me get a property in the UK?
Yeah, cool. So first part would be just a general understanding of the client, budget, reason for doing it, what they're looking to achieve, long-term goals. Okay, once we've got that, and we work with a number of developers, and those developers, the projects can start from £140,000, where a client only needs to put in 20%. So a client might only have a budget of £30,000 or £40,000. No problem, we've got the project. We work with developers who have multi-million-pound penthouses in central London, £4.5 million. We've got full floors in branded residences in Manchester, £8 million. So the benefit of that is that we don't have to pigeonhole a client into a project. We've got all of the different options, and we can then go, right, based on this fact find, here's 2 or 3 projects that we think are right for you. So what we do is we then go away. We have a full cash flow spreadsheet. So one thing that is a real bugbear of mine in this industry is people going, here's the property price, here's the yield, and it's going to grow by this.
This is what you're going to get.
Yeah. There's no data there, and there's none of the kind of micro economic factors. So what about service charges? What about stamp duty? All of these things are factored into a very detailed spreadsheet so that when we share that with the client, we can go, these are all of your costs and fees. So you fully understand exactly what you're investing in and you know what the return is going to be, as opposed to high level finger in the air. This is what it could be. So we'll sit down with the client, help them understand that spreadsheet, particularly if they're not a numbers person. It is quite complex. And then we'll work with them to find the right project. We'll get them. Again, we have exclusivity over the project. So normally we say, look, are you happy with this? Would you like us to hold the unit? We can hold that unit globally for them for 3 days. During that period, do our standard stuff. There'll be a small reservation fee, which is then taken off of the initial deposit.
Lovely.
And then we get them to the point of exchange of contracts. I think one thing that's actually probably worth mentioning for those that are investing in Dubai is when you look at what we call exchange of contracts, which is effectively when you pay the deposit on the property, that payment plan, I don't know if I'm sure you've seen this compared to the UAE, the payment plan in the UK is completely different. So new launch in Manchester, for example, 10% in 30 days, 10% in 4 months, nothing until completion. That blows people's mind, particularly the locals over here. You go, well, so I only have to put in 20%.
They're used to paying 5% every 3 months.
Exactly, and they're putting 60 to 70%. And this, for me, when you start comparing it to the UAE, people talk about the return on investment. Property, in my opinion, should be the return on capital invested. If that property's gone up 10%, your return on investment is 10%, but you've only put in 20% of that property value.
Leveraging.
So you've put in 20%, and you've gained 10%, that's a 50% return on the capital you've invested. That's a huge figure. So property, always return on capital invested versus the actual return on investment.
Lovely. And kind of after that, next steps then. I've owned a property, I'm doing well, you've helped me find a tenant. Do you leave me at this point, or is there an aftercare? Do you help me with my refinance?
100%. So you've got the management arm, which will be there to support you from the monthly perspective. Then we do something called portfolio optimization, which is super cool. So we'll sit down with the client.
Sounds it.
It's great, isn't it? What a great way. So we'll sit down with a client and we'll have a look at their portfolio, determine how it's performing. They're happy and they go, actually, it's done what I want to do. And actually, I'm ready to invest in another property. And we do a lot of business with existing clients. And I think that's testament to the service that we provide. But then also, if that property is increased in value, we can have the conversation. You've got £100,000 in equity. We can look at refinancing this property. We'll use our mortgage team to refinance for you. Pay 0 tax on that refinance, and we're now going to find another property for you to go and invest in.
So essentially, we've organically bought that next property from what we've invested without having to put in more money.
100%. So clients are stuck with us for life, whether they like it or not. Because it's a personal thing, right?
Yeah, of course.
And that's important.
It's one of the reasons why I love this role so much. Is like when somebody says, I'm building for my kid's future, and you're like, I'm a part of this. I'm helping you build that pot up. And one of the biggest things about being and working in investment is investing ourselves. And your story and your journey about being an investor is the biggest cosign that you can give it is I'll invest in it myself. And I think that always helps. One thing I'd like to touch on, I think you mentioned it there, was branded residences. The rise of branded residences and how this is now reshaping. So majority of branded residences, if I'm right, are only in London. There's quite a few coming in Manchester now. And how do you think that's going to change the landscape of Manchester?
For me, it's just an absolute game changer. We was very heavily involved.
Sorry to just jump in. Can you explain what a branded residence is?
Sure. So a branded residence will be a part hotel, part apartment building, where the apartment building will be branded in the same way as the hotel. So give an example, the W residence that we were involved in Manchester, They are W branded residences. They have access to all of the hotel amenities.
Wow.
So they're apartments in their own right, but they have access to all of the hotel facilities, and they benefit from a huge global brand.
Wow.
For me, from an investment perspective, it brings something very different and something quite difficult to replicate. I know you mentioned there's some coming in Manchester. Yeah. Not many, though.
Yes.
You know, a very small number. And it's important to have a good brand, a worldwide brand that attracts investors and tenants alike. From a rental perspective, I mean, if you look at Beetham Tower, which is the Hilton in Manchester, you have a look at the rents achieved in that building compared to anything else near it. It's an absolute game changer because it's part of the Hilton, and we've got some arguably better brands coming very soon. People want to live there. They want to have access to those facilities, and they will pay a premium to do it.
I think it's fantastic. And like you said, I think people don't really know how many are coming up, and it's such a new thing. But I think this is going to be revolutionary when it comes to Manchester. Yeah. Listen, great speaking to you today.
Thanks
Thank you very much for the time. Just as a part into kind of the listeners, tell us a bit about how we can get in contact with yourselves. And anything that you want to leave with in terms of investing in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think first of all, speak to you guys because you guys are awesome and we're a close partner of you. You know, when they're having those conversations with you, we're going to be there to support you and the team, help provide access to those kind of projects and just fill in the missing pieces of the puzzle. We will always have events on in Dubai. So if you want to come to those.
The events are brilliant. Come down.
So get them to reach out to you. We'll get them on the invite list. And let's just start chatting. And I always say to people, even if it's not, you think, property is not for me right now, it's absolutely fine. Understand what the options are, what the possibilities are. We're not going anywhere. And when the time's right, we'll be here to support.
I think that's a great place to leave it, El. Thank you very much for your time,
Brilliant.
mate. Take care.